Gregor Johann Mendel went to University of Vienna in 1850. During that time, his teachers and other intellectuals believed that if two plants of opposite characteristics are crossed for reproduction, then in the next generation, it will form an intermediate plant. Suppose if a tall plant is crossed for reproduction with a dwarf plant, then the next generation will have characteristics of both the parents and will yield a middle-sized plant. Now they also said that the characteristics of the parental generation are preserved. That is, although the next generation had mixed characteristics, but if they were crossed again, then after some generations, the characteristics of the parental generation will come back. Thus, when the plants with mixed characteristics are crossed, they may yield plants which are long or dwarf. So Mendel passed out from his university and he joined a monastery where he was given a piece of land to cultivate. So Mendel thought it would be a brilliant idea to test his teacher's hypothesis. Now he was wondering what plant to use for his experiment. He finally zeroed on the pea plant because pea plants, they generate in very short time. So he'll get the results very fast. Other than that, peas yield a lot of flowers and a lot of fruits. Apart from that, pea plants are also found in varieties of opposing characteristics. Like, pea plants can be of a tall variety or a dwarf variety. A pea plant can have peas which are round-shaped or wrinkle-shaped. They can have seed color which can be yellow or green, seed coat color which can be green or white. The pea pod can have this shape which is inflated or constricted like this. The pod color can be green or yellow. And finally, the pod position. See? In this, the flowers are formed at the axial position, whereas here the flowers are formed at the terminal position. Now, Mendel took seeds from two varieties, from the dwarf plant and from the tall plant. Slowly the plants grew up. See, this is the dwarf variety, this is the tall variety. Then he allowed cross-pollination between these two plants. And with time, these two plants yielded pea fruits. Now Mendel took the pea fruits, isolated the seeds, and he sowed these seeds, and he wanted to see if dilution of characteristic is formed. But he was surprised to see that this generation yielded plants of only tall varieties. Now he allowed cross-pollination between these two tall varieties. Now the plants yielded fruits. So Mendel plucked all the fruits, extracted the seeds, and sowed it again. He wanted to see if parental characteristics are reverted. Yes, he saw that majority of the plants are of the tall variety and few of the plants are of the dwarf variety. So this is the summary of the entire of Mendel's experiment. So what did he do? He took a dwarf plant and he took a tall plant and he crossed these two plants for reproduction. So the first generation yielded all tall plants. But the generation after that yielded tall and dwarf plants in the ratio of 3:1. Now Mendel wondered, how did a dwarf plant arise in the second generation when all the plants in the first generation were tall? So he thought hard about this, and he finally came up with this idea that there are two factors for each characteristic. So for the dwarfness, there are two factors, and he called it small t, small t. And similarly, for the tallness of the plant, there are two factors, capital T, capital T. Now, while reproduction, in the reproductive cells, the factors get halved. So, from the dwarf plant, this factor comes, and from the tall plant, this factor comes. These factors, because they were discovered by Mendel, are known as Mendelian factors. Now, these two plants of opposite characteristics were crossed. So, in the next generation, factors from both the plants came in this generation. So, this generation was an intermediate generation. So all the plants in this first generation had two factors, small t, capital T. Now, Mendel next took two such plants from the first generation, crossed them for reproduction, and he got 3 tall plants and 1 dwarf plant. So let's work this out, how this happened. See? All these plants were capital T, small t. So he took 2 such plants and crossed between them. Now, what are the various arrangements that can form from this cross? Yes, capital T can come with capital T to form 2 factors, capital T, capital T. Next, it can form capital T, small t. Again, these two can form capital T, small t. And finally, small t and small t combines to form small t, small t. So yes, now Mendel observed that his teachers were right, that the parental features are retrieved. Look at this dwarf plant. Yes, indeed, this dwarf plant was present in the parental generation. So how did this happen? Well, this can be formed only if the intermediate generation had both the factors capital T and small t. So he realized that his professors were right. There is dilution of factors, but this dilution is internal. Externally, he could only see tall plants. So he came up with this idea that this factor, which determines the tallness of the plant, must have been dominant over small t, which gives the dwarfness of the plant. So this is dominant over this factor, which is submissive or recessive. So when these factors were crossed, then 4 plants were yielded. One that had capital T, It was a pure tall plant that was present in the parental generation. Next, the two plants which looked tall but had both the factors. It had capital T and small t. But since capital T is dominant over small t, hence both these plants look tall. And finally, because small t and small t came together after crossing of these plants, it yielded a dwarf variety. So cross between two different varieties of one contrasting character or trait, like in this case, length of the plant, is known as the monohybrid cross, where mono means one. This is possible. A fair-skinned baby can be born from dark-skinned parents. Now, how does this happen? Try and figure this out. Well, yes. The mother must have had two factors, dark and fair, and even the father must have had two factors, dark and fair. This is the mother and this is the father. Now, their reproductive cells will have half the number of factors. So, a reproductive cell might have only D factor, or it might have F factor. Similarly, the father can also have two factors in his reproductive cells, D or F. Now, when the two parents crossed for reproduction, let us see what happens in the first generation. Yes, D can combine with D to form DD. D can combine with F to form DF. F can combine with D to again form DF. And finally, F can combine with F to form FF. Now, notice one thing. Both the mother and the father had two factors, dark and fair. But externally, you could see that both of them were dark-skinned. From here, you can say that dark is dominant over fair. So similarly, if they are crossed for reproduction, then it is possible that the reproductive cells form this combination FF, and that yields the fair baby.